God spoke to me that we're all called.
Yes.
And it wasn't just what happened 21 years ago when we started the church and God called those people. And I wanted people to realize that God has called everyone. And that word called, right? It just means that they have a divine invitation, that God wants to invite you. You have a seat at the table,
Yes.
if you will. And I just wanted people to realize that.
We're all called, and people don't realize that, but the role may look different within the church.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the beauty of the body of Christ, is because when we all work together, his church is just so beautiful and accomplishing everything that God's called us to do.
Our calling is to know Jesus and to also make him known. And I really wanted people to realize that God calls all of us. And that was really the heart behind all this.
Yeah.
I started my walk with God, but it wasn't until I went through the growth track that I really learned how to get plugged in. And I was in the process of becoming a nurse, going through school, at the same time trying to, really figure out how to not only grow my spiritual walk with God, but also to help my children grow their spiritual walk with God. The first mission trip that I went on, my wife came up to me and said, hey, we're going to go to Mexico and we're going to build a house and it's going to be great. And, I'm just like, we're going to take time off and go to Mexico and we're going to build a house. And okay, I've never built a house before, right? But witnessing healing, witnessing freedom, witnessing my kids and just their hearts change and really what they're feeling and what they're thinking during these times. So it was a really amazing experience. So my second mission trip, I just assumed we were going to go to Guatemala and set up this medical tent and give some, medical services, and it was going to be great. But we literally saw people freed of alcoholism. We saw family healing. We saw people give their life to Christ. Much more importantly than physical healing, we saw spiritual healing. Not only did these trips change my life, but they're changing my children's lives. They're changing my marriage. They're changing the way that I treat my patients. They're changing the way that I treat my family. So looking back in the experiences that I've had is really, the word called to me now is something so much more than when I heard it at the beginning of the year. As the church, we're called to love God and love others, and we're for sure called to spread that around the world.
So I got invited by a friend to come serve at Bayside Kids Camp with her. Didn't really know much about it, but I went with her and it was a lot of fun. I just knew that was something I really wanted to be a part of. Once I was 15, 16, I started really understanding everything at that time, serving and how important it was too. And so when I was 16, I just felt the Lord really telling me this is where he's kind of leading me into kids and everything. So I started serving on Sundays, if I do 3s and 4s. And on the weekend we teach them verses and we just teach them the same exact thing, the same lesson. And then at the end of the month they get a chance to tell us the bottom line or the verse, and to be able to see the kids actually grasping it has been really cool, and they're super excited. They'll run to the door, they'll tell their parents. After they learn the entire thing, they're then going home and doing teaching the lesson to their parents. And that's been super cool when the kids come back and the parents have came to me and they've told me that the kids know the entire thing. And parents have even said that's the reason that they keep coming back, is because their kids want to come back. And to see that the parents are able to get to know Jesus and everything through their kids has been really cool to see. The kids and the youth is really where it starts. They are literally the next generation, and they're gonna they're the people that are gonna be leading in the church one day. And so to be able to, even as a 3 and 4-year-old, to be able to teach them the stories of Jesus now and it go with them like the rest of their lives, I think is really important. But it's also helped me realize that like God like is calling me in like a certain place in the church.
So I met Sylvia through her friend who attends one of our campuses. She reached out to us looking for help for Sylvia. She explained to us that Sylvia was not in the greatest living condition. Sylvia lives in an RV park, and her RV was kind of falling apart, and a lot of water was getting into her roof. When we went over there to check it out and see how we could help her, we actually discovered that she did not need a new roof for her RV. She actually needed an entirely new RV. And so hearing this, I actually became kind of discouraged because I felt that that was impossible. That was an impossible need to meet. However, God is always up to something, and he's always working things out. And through our church, we were actually able to provide a new camper for Sylvia. When Sylvia found out that she was going to be getting a new camper, she was overjoyed. And she was kind of in disbelief. She didn't think it was real life. When we actually met her to deliver her new camper and move her out of the old one, she just had the biggest smile on her face. She had tears in her eyes. And the thing that sticks out to me the most is when she saw the bed that she gets to sleep in, because she was actually sleeping in a little cot that was tucked away in the corner of her old camper, away from the water that was getting in. And so when she looked at this new big bed, she kind of fell back, like she was like a little kid on Christmas, and she was just so happy. Since Sylvia received her new trailer, she's kind of started to become part of my family. We actually talk to each other on a regular basis. She has been to church a couple of times. We've shared meals together, and it's been really cool to actually have a friendship grow through this situation. I absolutely feel like I am called to reach my local community. It is part of who I am. It is part of how God designed me. And when we can show the love of Jesus to those in our local community, that's where lives truly change. And that, in my opinion, is where the kingdom is grown.
I can't believe that over 10,000 people have given their heart to the Lord over this year. Like that's, I mean, that's immeasurably more. Like who would have thought even 21 years ago that we could have said that in 1 year?
That's the church really, I think, doing what God
thriving.
Meant the church to be.
Yeah, and I think it's also just that our church is making an impact. It's making an impact within our church. It's making an impact in the city. It's making an impact in the community and around the world and in our next generation. Like, I think we're carrying out what God called us to. And so it's just exciting to see people carry in the vision of that.
It really is.
Yeah.
You know, leading up to the year, I'm always thinking and praying, and we're just like, God, what do you have for the church? What do we need from you as a direction or a word, if you will? And I think as we look back at all that's happened in 2023 and we see all the growth of the church, okay, then what did God do all of this for? And I think, you know, God blesses us for a purpose, for a reason. And then to whom much is given, like much is required. So what do we do? And I know for me, all of our lives, at the end of our lives, we want it to have made an impact. But I think if our life is going to make an impact, it has to have focus. Yeah. And in fact, the more focused you are, the greater the impact. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing lots of things well, that's great. But if I do a few things really well, then the impact is much greater. So for me, what I want is for us to all realize that our life could be focused. And we all have different roles. But what if we realize the roles that God has called us to, and we really make a focus in that? And I think we can make a huge impact. And I think that in our church, we can say that. How can I focus in my walk with God more? Here are the things that I can do to grow my relationship with God more. As a church, there are things that I want us to do as well to focus, to make a greater impact. Man, one of those things, like what we're going to be doing in Ireland. I think the church is close to being archaic in Europe. Yeah. It's almost simply the church is just a museum. But there's a flicker of life there. And so we're going to focus over there because I think a revival in Europe, it could start right there in Ireland, and it could start with what we're doing right now over there. I'm really excited about that focus point.
This is the Hillis Green and the Church's Green. And at one time in Ireland's history, churches like this existed all over the island. And more than just church buildings, they were the centers of community. They were the place people went when they were hurt, lost, and broken. Fortunately today, all that has changed. And all we have in many of our cities, towns, and villages is the rubble and the remnants of what was once a great move of God.
Like, what is this kind of inspiring?
This is, I mean, it just shows me God can do it again.
Yeah, so growing up in Ireland for me was interesting. I grew up in a home that was not a godly home, it was a godless home. And the kind of environment that we grew up in will be one of like social housing. So a lot of people who lived in the area I grew up in would have been kind of like below the bar of middle class, lower class, kind of poor, and not a lot of people with opportunity and nothing good to do. So I grew up in that with no religion. So I quickly became a byproduct of where I was raised. You can just imagine the things that I was doing and the friends I was with. But for me, that was normal. That was life. And actually, in reality, it was a life that was broken. So I got caught up in alcoholism, drugs itself, trying to, again, push the line always to where do I find significance? Where do I actually find like I can fit in? But never actually fully fit in. That was the crazy thing, not knowing who I was. And so my teenage years was this journey of me trying to figure out who is Sam. But as I tried things, it was always an empty bag. It was always, a point where I have to turn back around and go back to the beginning. So searching, really. So we ended up on a holiday, a vacation with my friends in Spain, south of Spain. It's called Benidorm, which really is a hopeless place, a place where nothing godly happens. And that was a time in my life where I was broken, I was hurt, and I drank a lot of alcohol, took a lot of drugs, and I actually nearly died. Someone had found me on a street, I was passed out, brought me to their house, and in that moment I realized this is not my future. This is, my future is not to be one where I'm going to lie on a street full of drugs and alcohol. Surely there is more to life than living this way. So that was really a point in my life where I said, I'm 16, I'm still young. I know there's more to this life, there's more in this world for me. So I kind of came back from Spain asking those questions. And so when someone invited me to Lighthouse, it was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a shot. Why? Because everything else has failed. Everything in this world has failed for me. Nothing has come true. So thank God, Easter 2011, God came true. I always thought God was mad at me, that God was angry at me, perhaps because of what I have done, perhaps because God's an angry God. That was the image I had. But on Easter Sunday 2011, I had a realization that God's not mad at me, but he's mad about me, that God actually loves me, and that is the gospel message. That's why he sent his son Jesus. So in that moment, I was faced with this decision about, okay, now this is something I know, I feel it, I experienced it, now I gotta accept it. The pathway for me in Lighthouse was interning, and then interning, more responsibility, leading a youth ministry, which I had no experience in how to do that, and then from there, getting involved in other areas of church, in Sundays and other roles. But for me, the greatest privilege that I've had so far on my journey is to be able to lead the campus that I got saved in 2011. It's full circle. I met my wife in this campus. We got married. Now we got 4 beautiful daughters. So I'm so honored, and I just think it's just a great privilege. And because of the local church, because of the men and women of God who were so faithful every Sunday, every week making church happen, I happened to walk through those doors and experience God in a new, fresh, and powerful way.
We have this vision as a small C local church so that we, as the wider body, can see the spiritual landscape of our nation transformed in our lifetime. To see, again, in Sam's story, the epitome of our mission, our vision, our values, our hopes and dreams. He represents to us, again, what hopefully will be normative. Right now, it's exclusive, it's unusual, but our dream is that one day it'll be normative for young people, young Irish men, young Irish women, and everyone else that lives in Ireland to have those kind of experiences with God and to be able to walk in their extraordinary purpose. Less than something like 0.03% of the population are Christian. So 99.7% of people that live here don't know God, and they're not just passive in their atheism, they're antagonistic. They're in many cases they're hostile to the things of God. Being a first-generation Christian, leading a first-generation Christian church in a nation that is again first-generation, there just isn't the facilities or the resource of knowledge or equipment or people or money available to us to be able to do the things that we need to do. So constantly, we're always trying to figure out creative solutions, trying to be as resourceful as we can. As we look at the island, we think there's so many towns and cities that need churches. If we had more resource, we could go to these places and we could open life-giving centers of transformation. I mean, we have leaders, we have stories of people coming, finding Christ, but the resource enables us to multiply ourselves, to go further, faster. With these challenges of uphill and just not having the resources we need, it can just drain you. But as long as we stay persevering and stay pushing and stay faithful, and with the help of friends like Bayside, I believe that we will see a victory in this land for the glory of Christ.
I love the fact that we realize that God has brought us all together. He's called us to focus on something just like that. Of course, it's really other places around the world too that we're making an impact, that we're focusing like that. Of course, with our next generation, we're dialed in on that this year, and we're gonna hit it harder than we ever have before. And then also in our local community. And I think by these kinds of focuses and going, here's what we're gonna do, I don't know. I can't wait to do the video at the end of this year, celebrating all that we've done.
I'm excited about this year and focusing on what God has called us to do and making an impact in.
Yeah, I think so. That's what's going to happen this year.
Yeah.
That we would make a concerted focus, and we're going to make a huge impact in our families, in our walk with God, in our finances, our community, the next generation, and around the world. I think we'll make a greater impact than we've ever made before, and we'll see the fruit of that in our lives as we focus.